Watch Dr. Drew's new show at 9 on HLN. Weeknights on HLN.
Sleep is supposed to restore the mind and body, but if you can't sleep, nighttime is anything but restful. In fact, to full reveal, I had a really fitful night last night. I'm hoping to talk to my physician friend here that's here, see if he can help me out. 1 in 4 Americans cannot get to sleep or stay asleep, so they take pills, and then they take more pills, and they don't think about what the underlying cause perhaps is, or what might be what they might do to themselves by taking pills or not getting that underlying condition treated. So we're here to talk about this growing problem. First, I've got Dr. Douglas Prisco. He's the Director of Sleep Medicine at the University of Southern California. I have Julie Kim. She is one of his patients, and she suffers from insomnia. And I've also got Don Blunt. He has a more common problem with sleep called sleep apnea. We'll get into all that. But first, I want to talk to Dr. Prisco and ask what happens to us physiologically when we don't get enough sleep.
So physiologically, you start to get some changes cognitively. So besides being fatigued...
That's why I'm out of it today. Weird things are coming out of my mouth. I had a fitful night, and honest to God, my brain does not work right today.
Well, you know, after 1 hour, or at least after one night of unrestful sleep, most likely people will be fine the next day. It's usually when you have this persistent sleep deprivation, so people are really shaving hours every night, 5-6 hours of sleep only, and they are getting this cumulative sleep debt that we call, that is essentially responsible for some of the changes that we see.
And then people are also been buzzing lately about the cardiovascular effects of sleep disturbance and sleep apnea.
So sleep apnea has been proven to affect cardiovascular risk, and we now know that suffering from sleep apnea, and there's all different degrees of sleep apnea, including mild, moderate, and severe, and the patients that have severe sleep apnea have a direct link to cardiovascular disease.
So like heart attacks?
Heart attacks,
strokes.
Heart failure, strokes.
Okay. Now, Julie, you had a sleep disturbance. Can you tell us about it?
I still have it, and I'm actually undergoing treatment at the moment. This sleep restriction therapy that we
How bad did the problem get? And then tell us how Dr. Prisco treated
Well,
you.
it started with sleep maintenance insomnia, which I guess is I was waking up in the middle of the night after 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And this happened about 3 years ago. It started happening. I was going through a sort of a rough period in my life, and then I think from there I just developed bad habits.
Well, let me stop you, Julie, and say that now if she came to me, and the average doctor who has like 3 minutes with their patients, you hear that story and you go, oh, okay, mirtazapine or some sort of antidepressant that induces sleep, that'd be the first order of business. I'm sure you went through that.
And that's exactly what happened with Julie. So Julie...
And by the way, let's be clear, I'm not suggesting that most doctors would prescribe a sleeping medicine. They'd prescribe an antidepressant.
Right.
That's typically what would happen with what you're describing.
So Julie's case is exactly like many Americans in the fact that she came to me after suffering for insomnia for about 2 years. She was prescribed Ambien. She had taken the most common antihistamine over the counter. She had used alcohol, some other sleep restriction, or at least sleep maintenance programs, and basically had no success. And when she came to me, we decided that, look, we're going to get rid of the medications, and we're basically going to have her take charge of her sleep. And we started with basically filling out sleep diaries, getting some basic sleep history, and really trying to consolidate her sleep and make her have a more predictable sleep night after night.
So what you did was pushed her to go to bed later and stay asleep longer.
We're in the middle of a treatment called sleep restriction, which is essentially increasing the sleep pressure or the desire to fall asleep during the day by keeping her awake most of the day and limiting her bedtime to mostly what her total sleep time really was about 5 to 6 hours.
This sounds like is it a new approach?
It's been around for a while. The problem is that people tend to get worse before they get better, which is exactly what Julie has been describing in the middle of this. But it is something that takes commitment on both her part and the physician.
Well, let's talk to somebody who's had the more standard kind of sleep, sounds like sleep disorder. I don't know Don's case yet, but Don, apparently you have obstructive sleep apnea. Is that correct?
That's correct. Basically, I was unable to stay asleep because of my interference in my breathing canals for a lesson. That's not a very technical evaluation.
Well, I guess what we'd say is that you had, like you're saying, you had obstruction, and then the doctors evaluated you, put you through a sleep study. They put you in a sleep lab and watched you, and they saw that you were snoring and maybe not breathing for periods of time. And then they gave you something probably called a CPAP. Is that right?
That's correct, and I use it to this day. It's a pillar type tubing that wraps around my head, and there's constant pressure exuded throughout the night, which keeps my breathing passages open, which allows me to sleep.
Dr. Prisco, that's the more standard sleep apnea story. I'm surprised that many patients cooperate with the big apparatus.
You'd be surprised. So Don's just like one of 40 million Americans that are suffering from sleep apnea. And basically, there's two things with Don's case, which we heard earlier. The fact that he has sleep apnea, but he also suffered from insomnia, which can coexist with sleep apnea, which kind of doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Why am I falling asleep all day, but yet I can't sleep at night? And in Don's case, he was successfully diagnosed as having sleep apnea and was prescribed something called CPAP, which is a mask that delivers pressure and opens up and basically stents the airway open so that he can breathe effectively at night.
And that's a pretty common thing these days.
That is extremely common, and people, once they end up getting on it and they sleep beautifully through the night, they feel so much better that they can't live without it.
That they wear the big mask, they don't mind it so much. And,
Right.
and again, this is preventing cardiovascular disease in guys like Don.
Right.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Prisco. Thank you. Appreciate it. Julie, Don, thank you for sharing your stories with us. I want to remind people also that when I do sleep stories, just keep in mind, sleep disturbances, there are many different kinds. It's actually very complicated. We're keeping it kind of simple here. But the message I always tell people is if you're getting weird behaviors at night, basically anything you can do when you're awake, you can do you're asleep. And see a sleep specialist if you're having problems.